And Craig is the Vice President of Indirect Channel Sales for Comcast Business Class Services. In this role, Craig manages Comcast Indirect Channel Partner Team and the overall indirect channel programs for business services. Prior to Comcast, Craig managed the indirect channel team for Level 3 communications, which focused on telecom consultants and VAR partners that sell IP, voice, and data services to small and medium-sized business customers. The program achieved great success and was named as top indirect channel program for the industry in both Channel Partners magazine as well as Computer Reseller News, CRN, in recent years. Craig has spent over 24 years in various indirect channel roles in sales, marketing, and business development with NTT, Verio, Quest Communications, IBM Corporation, and Sony Corporation. Craig was recently named the 2009 and 2010 as one of the top 100 channel executives in CRN magazine, as well as the top 10 channel chiefs in Channel Partner magazines. Craig holds a BS in marketing from the University of Colorado Boulder, and Craig currently resides in Denver, Colorado. So without any further ado, I would now like to hand over the webinar to Craig. Take it away, Craig.
All right, thanks very much, Estelle, and good to be with you all. I actually am in Denver again today, although I'm typically on the road out seeing partners, and pleased to share a topic that I'm very passionate about today, one that I think has profound impacts to our overall industry and those of us who are channel professionals. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about it. We've been fortunate here at Comcast the last 2 years to earn some great recognition as well, and we've been able to build a program that's had some pretty phenomenal success. Ironically, Comcast didn't have a channel program, so I was fortunate enough to build one from the ground up. And what I'm going to share with you today speaks a lot to what we're seeing. I think it's a profound example of the changes going on in the industry. That kind of electric growth is occurring because of the changes in the industry. So excited to bring that to you today. I'll spend the next half hour or so talking about some slide material, and then I'll open it up to some questions after that. So I'll give you an overview real briefly of Comcast just so you understand a little bit about what we do, and then talk more about where we see the channel going. And then we'll go into some of the details of how these compensation models we see out there are working and where they're going and what people are going to need to do to deal with those. I'll give you some words of advice, and then we'll go to question and answer. If you're not familiar with Comcast Business, we're a approximately $3 billion division underneath Comcast Cable. We're a very fast-growing division of Comcast Cable, which is about a $40 billion division of Comcast overall, which is about $60 billion. And we recently took complete ownership of NBC and NBC Universal, so we have other properties such as Universal Studios, the Golf Channel, CNBC, and some other networks that you see listed there. So we're able to leverage a lot of that in working with our partners, but our focus is definitely on driving customers to buy our internet, voice, and data services along with video, which of course is cable. And there's quite a bit of business in that regard out there. You know, it's important to note that our business is a recurring revenue model, so we don't sell hardware and software. If we do, it's part of the service, and people are charged a monthly recurring fee for it. So we don't do anything but recurring revenue, and it's obviously our existence has been for many years. We are the largest cable operator in the U.S. There's several others like Time Warner Cable and Charter and Cox, but we operate in 39 states out of the 50 and about 18 of the top 20 U.S. markets. This though, is a recent division of Comcast. It only started in 2006, and we have more than 1 million customers now nationwide that are business customers. We add a new small business customer about every 15 seconds or so. So it's a fast-growing machine on that end. But we also sell fiber-based services as well as coax services, fiber for really scalable customers who want to go from 10 megs to 10 gigs, and that's really a big focus of the channel for us. And of course, they buy voice services as well. We sell hosted voice services, and then we also sell video services with cable programming. And we sell into industries like hospitality, where we have special services designed for hotel chains and that type of thing. But as such, we've been named in the last 2 years as the fastest internet service provider and continue to get a lot of awards. So that's a bit on Comcast Business, just so you understand what it is we are selling, but it's all based on recurring revenue. And I thought that was a good segue to talk about where is the industry going and what is happening. Of course, I mentioned we own CNBC, but I do obviously read a lot on what's going on out there. This was an article just a week ago, and the title of the article was, "Are you still using an office phone? How quaint and how primitive?" And really, indeed, that is becoming more and more true with what's going on in the internet and the world of cloud. You know, the changes that are occurring are just astronomical, changes that have been beyond any since the invention of the telephone in the first place. And what's happening is, instead of one application, which is a phone call like we're on right now, the future is about millions of context-based interactions with people. And in 10 years, the majority of communications will be cloud-based and more user-focused and very responsive to business needs. So the notion is that beyond just making basic phone calls, our communications capabilities will be infinite. And it's already starting to occur. I'm actually talking to you now on a hosted voice solution that's in the cloud and is not based on traditional switch technology that's used on the traditional telephone company network. So it's an example of that, but there's many more. And I think this is really illustrative of what's happening on this slide. This is something from Cognizant, where they spoke about social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. They refer to that acronym as SMAC, S-M-A-C, or the SMAC stack. And you look here at the era, one that I was familiar with was particularly the mini-computer era from 76 to 92, where there was 10 million computers out there. And we've gone from that to an estimation of 100 billion computers from a machine-to-machine world. And in that kind of world, in that kind of environment, the internet is going to be a huge driver to enable that capability. And we're expecting that we go from, and these estimates are by others as well, but we're going from essentially 35 exabytes of usage right now to 35,000. And that is just an astronomical number. An exabyte is 10 to the 24th power, just to give you an idea of how much data that is. And it's because there's so many handheld devices and iPads and mobile devices pushing video particularly, which requires an enormous amount of bandwidth, and of course that's what we sell. So all this cloud activity is driving a huge amount of business to our capabilities and as well as our competitors, but it's reshaping really the notion of the PC world. And some people ask me, what is the cloud anyway? And you know, to put it in simple terms, it's the connectivity, which is required to get to the cloud. It's the data center where the servers reside that provide the cloud, whether it's private or public. And then, of course, it's the business applications that people use all the time. And clearly to us and also to customers, the connection to the cloud matters, because obviously if you're on a clogged freeway and you can't get to where the data is, then the experience the customer is going to have from a user standpoint is going to be very poor. So we are intricately associated with the computing industry, where I would say, you know, even 5 years ago, it was more of a church and state model. Now it's more or less one and the same, that the cloud and what we do are intrinsically linked together, as much as an Intel chip is intrinsically linked together into a server that's in a data center. It's part of the total solution, and it's a critical piece to providing it. As such, I offer these thoughts for people to consider on business models. And you think about, just on a simple example, do insurance agents rebuild the policies they sell, or do they actually recommend a policy, and the true customer gets a bill from the insurance company, and the partner, in this case an agent, is a broker. They're not reselling or rebilling anything. They're acting as an agent. And so too is a financial planner who says to you or I, buy these securities, these mutual funds, or they'll buy them for you. But in the end, you own them. They're not reselling them. They're not marking them up. You're actually, you know, getting the statement from the security company in an aggregate form, and the financial advisor you have is acting as a broker, getting a commission on a recurring basis for having recommended that portfolio. Well, indeed, in a world of cloud, VARs are out there now, And certainly they are rebilling customers. That's been the case from the beginning of time of the VAR world. But more and more we're seeing a change in that. And that, you know, in reality, it's all about recurring revenue. And they can now represent the customer as an agent without having to build a communications network or all the cloud offerings that are needed. Instead, they don't need to put all that money up themselves as they once used to with the financing and other elements associated with that. They can simply sell somebody else's offering and not even take title to it and earn a commission for doing so. And we have, you know, a number of examples of that. So our prediction is that because of the cloud, more and more IT vendors will actually become service providers like we are, or their technology will become less visible with the customer because of the shift to the cloud. If you think about it, you can't see what's in a data center. You can't see the logo of the hardware in the data center, so it becomes invisible. And so because of that, the value in the channel and the sales process will change dramatically. And we think that the solution provider of our world will become more trusted advisors for a solution that's bought by the customer, but they don't have to create that solution per se, and they don't have to rebill it. And so we think, especially as it relates to services like ours, that the growing compensation model is going to be upfront commissions or recurring residual commissions, not the reselling and rebilling of the traditional model. And maybe a few partners that are multi-billion-dollar partners, system integrators, will do that, but your average VAR will not be doing that because they can't simply compete with that model when you have companies that are multi-billion-dollar entities doing it. And they become more like an insurance agent in the prior example or a financial advisor in the prior example. They recommend solutions, but they earn commissions from others for recommending them. And we think that's changing because basically the telecom, cable companies, and other service providers are becoming that single source to the cloud, the connection, the data center, and the biz apps, as we said earlier. These companies already know how to bill for recurring revenue. It's in their DNA. And we have millions of customers that are buying cloud solutions. And on top of that, many of the telecom companies are actually buying cloud companies and data center companies in large numbers. The challenge, though, is many partners out there are just simply incapable of rebilling our kinds of services, especially voice. And the idea of rebilling recurring services in general is a foreign notion to a lot of companies who are used to a one-time sales element. So since service providers already bill customers, typically we don't want an intermediary taking our bill, rebilling it a second time, and billing it downstream again. It doesn't make a lot of sense. We want to bill the customer directly because we are doing all the support for that customer, and we're handling the AR as well. And we'll see other public cloud vendors entering into this game with Amazon, Rackspace, Google. They already are. And we think the major MSPs will become multi-billion-dollar solution providers and may also become a channel partner as well. Companies like a Presidio and others will end up jumping into this space in larger numbers. And so then when you think about that, there's 180,000 VARs out there. Can they even compete in a world like that with their own resold cloud offerings? Or are customers really going to want a recurring bill from somebody who's a larger known entity? Are they going to trust all their data to a smaller VAR up the street when they can't physically touch the box in their office anymore? We think not. We think they're going to go move to someone who's larger. So this has profound implications in the setup of this discussion that I wanted to put in place so you kind of have a context for where I'm going. Now we'll talk about what does that mean related to recurring revenue and channel models and comp models and distribution models, which is the meat of the rest of the presentation. So, you know, I've already talked about this collision. The cloud is driving this collision between what we would think of as traditional telecom agent companies who are from the telecom world and traditional VARs from the IT world. There's roughly 5,000 of these telecom consulting companies out there, or agents, and there's, depending on who you ask, 150 to 180,000 VARs or solution providers. And because of what customers are demanding of them, there's a collision between these two channel species moving together in rapid numbers and needing to understand this whole world, as I referenced earlier, about the connectivity, the apps, and the data center. They now have to know it all because the customer is demanding it of them. But knowing the rule of 78 is a critical piece in understanding this model. And I always ask audiences that may not be familiar with this. This is an accounting rule. You can Google it. Rule of 78 is really illustrated well in this next diagram. But I asked the question: what's $1,000 sold every month worth in recurring revenue after 12 months of billing? Some people say 12,000, and of course they would be 100% wrong. Because that revenue recurs every month. So if you can see it here, if this was 2013 and in January I sold something for $1,000 and in February I sold something for $1,000 and so on for the rest of the year, then I would be billing $78,000 by the end of the year. And this is the power of a recurring revenue model, that when you get that residual billing occurring, it adds up to a significant number. Doesn't necessarily do that inside of a very short period of time, but after 2 to 3 years it becomes very large very quickly. And that's the challenge with VARs, is being able to endure and have that patience to get to that point where you can get a large enough recurring base going. Once you do, it becomes very significant. But really there's a challenge is how do you compensate for the model, and obviously there's been a deviance on that from the IT world versus the carrier world. I've already shared it. And we're selling hosted voice and SIP trunking and Metro Ethernet, large circuits. The IT world selling Microsoft and other applications, networking, infrastructure as a service. And how are these things going to be compensated for? Well, the classical models really, in short summation, and this oversimplifies it a bit, would be a referral model where there's a lead that's passed and the company actually closes it on behalf of the partner and gives them a one-time fee and thanking them for the lead. The agent model is definitely more of a pregnant model where you receive a recurring monthly commission, or you may get some upfront, some recurring, and you're very involved with the customer for the life cycle of the customer. You keep getting paid for as long as that customer is billing. And then, of course, the classic reseller model that's margin-based and requires, the partner to be more and more involved effectively as the provider of the service. So these are the things that, you got to look at as these three models. And I submit to you that central model, and I mentioned it earlier in blue, is going to become more and more in vogue for a lot of services out there, because companies are going to want to ask their channels to sell on their behalf, but they want to bill the customer themselves, not let it be rebilled. And I think a lot of customers are going to want to be billed by a reliable entity. So the payment types start evolving. Either they're residual or one-time upfront or some combination of the two. And then there's multiple channel partner types, be they cloud builders or traditional VARs or MSPs, telecom agents and networking VARs. All of them are getting drawn into this thing because they're being asked to consider this for their customer, how they can deliver the services that the customer is asking for, and therefore driving a new compensation model overall. And I think that's the thing that we really got to look at. So we've talked about the idea of an upfront payment model, and we have a lot of partners like this too. We have a number of ours who don't really want to get as involved in this process. They simply send us a lead, and our direct team closes it. And we have, in multiple thousands, these kinds of partners that do this. Then we have partners that are much more involved that want to own that process, and they get the residual model, where they get the recurring revenue stream that they build up over the life of a contract. And obviously it takes time to build that up, but it can be extremely lucrative and much more profitable than the sale of an upfront solution that involves hardware on the customer's premise, where you only get a one-time hit. And I could show you, the amount of margin that you get on that one-time hit for a one-time sale, as opposed to the commission you would earn if that were sold as an agent model. And then, of course, there are models where you get paid both an upfront piece. As an example, you get 3x the monthly recurring fee and some small residual. And that's another model as well that we use, and kind of bridges the gap between an immediate compensation model and an annuity stream. Some VARs want that more immediate gratification. So we offer varying models to accommodate those issues. Now, you might say, well, who out there is doing this, Craig? I mean, is this really real? And the answer is, well, absolutely it is. And there's literally hundreds, thousands of VAR partners involved in this model. a good brand name one that is CDW, and of course they've been traditionally selling lots of hardware, still do. That's their primary model, but they actually have a carrier services team of about 25 people, and all they do is sell recurring revenue services, both circuits themselves as well as cloud offerings from various cloud-oriented service providers. And they generate a significant amount of revenue. They've got a dedicated practice director that's doing this, and they're representing multiple cloud offerings that involve telephony cloud solutions as well as infrastructure as a service solutions. And they're operating this out of Chicago, taking the leads from their direct sales force and allowing this specialized team who's used to selling recurring revenue to actually close these opportunities for them. There's another one up in Connecticut that's a VAR that's been selling Cisco and Avaya and other solutions that also acts as an agent. They've been around for 25 years, used to just sell PBXs and key systems and other hardware routers, started moving into selling recurring services about 5 years ago. And now they do a bit of both. There are some customers that still have traditional on-premise solutions, but a lot of what they do is sell recurring and residual solutions. They've got a dedicated team that actually has quotas associated with selling networking services, and they provide lead pass between their team that's used to selling hardware and the team that's used to selling recurring services. And they've been doing this for over 5 years now and have been very, very successful in doing it. These are a microcosm of a larger number of partners out there that are following this same exact model and have been able to be highly successful with it, and it's very lucrative for them. But they had to invest in it. They had to have teams that were dedicated to make it successful. But in the end, they're starting to see very good traction with it. It's also important, besides the comp model of paying the partners, to have the systems and tools for it, and that goes without saying. But what you need to do to manage an inventory of hardware and software is totally different than what you need to manage a services model. So we have to provide quoting systems that allow partners to understand how to quote each and every service we have depending on where the customer is located, which the price can then vary, particularly with Metro Ethernet. And also a system to actually manage and track the commissions that are being paid to the partners. So these are foreign notions to one-time payment models of hardware and software, but common practice for the many carriers and service providers that have these models out there. And having a portal that does all that for your partners is a table stakes item that must be in place to be successful. These systems, of course, provide instant quotes. They show how much revenue is being driven by each partner and what commission they're earning. They track every single customer order and the status of that order, of where it is in the provisioning process, and a whole lot more. They allow you to do trouble tickets when a customer needs something done with their service. And so it's a different world that is here needing to support these systems, and the partners need to have access to those types of systems in order to manage the customer relationship. And in fact, they need to be empowered to act as though they were our own direct sales force, but be empowered through a portal to do all this on behalf of their customers that they bring. And the world indeed is changing too in the distribution model of these services. In the world of telecom traditionally, where we're talking about the phone company, the CLECs, the ILECs, and even cable, there's this species of partner known as a master agent, and actually all they do is sell recurring service opportunities for which they earn a commission, and then they pay downstream VARs and downstream telecom agents. And they have various tools to support their partners in that quoting relationship I talked about earlier and help them design the right solution for their customers. These are names you probably may not have heard of on the right-hand side, but they look like a distributor of services. And ironically, on the left-hand side, what you're seeing now is a path on many of the distributors moving towards the building of such a practice where they are selling now recurring services or selling on behalf of other carriers and cable companies. So beyond their traditional model of pack, pick, and ship, which is what they know, they're starting to sell services as a services distributor instead of a hardware or software distributor. and they're beginning to evolve their model. And indeed, one of them, and I won't even name them, is concerned that within the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to lose 30% of their top-line revenue that once was on-premise to a cloud offering. And the question then is, how do they make up for that when they're operating off of 2% gross margins? So there's a profound impact of this cloud and recurring revenue model that's impacting strategies of distributors, and you're seeing it all happen real time. If you Google what's going on in that space, you'll see just all the activities happening there. And of course, you have to pay your own channel sales team. So in our case, we have channel sales managers all over the country, and people do it in different ways. At the moment, we've offered a model where we just pay for the sales that are being done. Each month, there's a specific amount of money can be earned by each person based on a quota they have of new MRR sales. Companies who have matured in this model over time have done a different model where they pay a certain amount of money up front in base and then a certain amount of revenue. So you have to keep the customers you brought on and then continue to add new ones. What you don't want is what's known as a leaky bucket, where the customers you signed up for the recurring service churn out. So there's models that involve paying upfront initially as these models get started, and then you pay your channel sales force over time more on the revenue base that their partners are driving, so that you're motivated to keep the customers they brought. There's also models that have motivated channel managers to bring in new logos with their partners and maybe target specific enterprise types accounts more than others and get paid more for doing that. But important is that the partner manager, the channel manager, is aligned with the way the compensation works for the partner, so that the two are doing the same thing. And very key is, obviously, if you're paying people on sales, they have to install, because in our world, there's a big difference between something sold, like this month I might sell $1,000, versus revenue, which is actually what that $1,000 is worth over the course of the fiscal year. And revenue and sales are not the same in a recurring world of compensation. So if they don't install, you have to claw back money. Just because you book an order, it may fall out. It may be because you had too high of a construction cost or other fees that were associated with it, and the customer fell out. So these are some nuances that are part of the recurring model that have to be dealt with. And there's other things to watch out for, and certainly this is at a 30,000-foot view as I kind of wrap this thing up, and I'll take your questions. The cloud is driving fundamental technology and business model changes, and even without our world being involved with it, that's a true statement. With our world being involved with it, with connectivity, voice, video services, enormous changes are happening. But to succeed, both the vendors and the partners have to realize this is a different model than the upfront one-time sales model, and it requires a totally different comp structure. We believe that agent model of a recurring commission is more likely to be the model that works than a resell model over time. We also believe that most partners, to succeed in doing this, have to overhaul their sales force and create a separate team that understands recurring revenue and is not hardwired into one-time event sales that are the traditional model of the last 30 years in IT. It's a very different world, and it's a different model. And, of course, there are many nuances associated with it that I've just scratched the surface on today at a very high level. And I think it's incumbent on everyone to really think about these models and what it's going to mean to their business as we evolve over the next 5 years, because it's changing and changing fast all around us. And it's even changing our business and the growth we're seeing as well. But exciting times, and probably never been a better time to be in the channel. Maybe in the last 10 years since the advent of the Internet, this is some of the most exciting times yet with the cloud. So excited to see what goes on in the industry, and excited to see where we go. And all these elements here in this final slide are things that I think people need to think about as they consider their models. So that's a very top-of-the-waves view of some of the things to consider. And I think with that, Estelle, I'll open up here to you to take any questions that the audience may have on some of these elements.
Fantastic, Craig. Thank you so much. That's really, really insightful. I'm sure that there are going to be quite a few questions coming through. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we do get started on the Q&A. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question, please do raise your hand using the raise hand button located in the GoToWebinar control panel. If at any time your question has already been answered, please lower your hand to remove yourself from the question queue. Please do remember that if you prefer to ask a question via chat, you may also do so by using the chat window located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. In the meantime, I would like to turn it back to Craig because we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So Craig, the first question is, what is the typical amount a solutions provider earns for selling recurring revenue services on behalf of a service provider?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's kind of like, what is the margin? And obviously in a hardware world, that margin is, typically in low single digits. A normal commission for selling, say, an Ethernet circuit, let's just say it's a 1 gigabit circuit from one location to another for a customer. In the carrier and cable world, a normal commission for that would be 15 to 16% of the billing amount. So if it was billing, I'm making up a number, $10,000 a month, then $1,500 would be what that partner would be earning every month for as long as that customer is billing. So you can see how lucrative that can become if you could build up a base of $200,000 to $300,000 a month of recurring revenue and then earn 15–16% of that without any AR, without any of the support costs that go along with that, and really just becoming a selling entity and an advisor, like a financial advisor. It could become very electric very fast on that kind of amount of money, and far more than you would earn on the sale of a one-time hardware event. So it's pretty lucrative. That's generally where it falls out in terms of the comp model. And some people, beyond that amount, they'll pay, besides the residual, they may pay a combination of upfront. They might pay like 3 times the MRC upfront and then a smaller residual over time. There's a hybrid model like that. But on average, I'd say most out there would be paying somewhere in that mid-teens % rate for a service like that.
Fantastic. Another question has come through that I think ties in with that also is, under the residual module, do you envisage paying for eternity, or would this turn off at some point? A point being, how do you keep the agent hunting?
Well, the way you do that is you have a contract that requires them to generate new revenue over time. So you can't just sit on a base. You have to continue to drive new revenue. There is a challenge in that regard that there's this distribution model, and typically you can only enforce that clause with the partner that has the contract with you. So in the distributor model, you'd be asking the distributor to do that, and then in kind they would need to assign downstream quotas to the downstream partners to do that for them. So indeed, you don't want a situation where the partner brings in a couple of one-hit wonders and then never sells again. You need to have them actively involved. In addition to that, renewals are not something in a contract that are typically paid automatically. Rather, the partner is required to be actively involved in the renewal process. So these contracts tend to last for 36 months or so. And then after that, they come up for renewal. If the partner has vanished, then your contract should state you don't need to pay them. However, if they're actively involved in the renewal, they should continue to get paid as long as the customer is billing. And so that needs to be factored into the comp model. Some people will say, well, how can you actually afford to do that? And you look at the other side of that equation and comparing a direct sales model to an indirect model that has this. Obviously, the challenge on the direct side is you've got a lot of churn with direct sales forces where you have to continue to retrain them, rehire them, deal with HR, legal issues, and so the costs associated with that model are also steep. So, of course, in this model, the only cost you have is paying the commission. In the direct model, you got all the costs of employing someone full-time, and then you got to compare those two models. But I would submit that over time, those costs are equal from both those channels, considering what costs there are. So it's a very good question, one you could get into a lot more detail on, but at a high level, that's our view of it.
Really appreciate that, Craig. Thank you. Another one that's come in is the direction of these models essentially the same as the financial advisory industry associated with mutual funds, like front-end loaded and back-end loaded, etc.?
Well, I use that example only for illustrative purposes, but a financial advisor earns an accreditation to be able to actually sell you those kinds of securities. And I think that partners need to have accreditation as well. Certainly, there's different nuances about backloaded and front-loaded. And I didn't use that example to talk about the difference between financial models and telecom or cloud, but only to say that the notion is that there's an advisor, and that advisor is intelligent about what's the best solution for their customers, and they earn a commission for advising those customers on that. The same is true of a VAR, and I think it's why we believe this model will be there. But the point of the story is it's not an unusual model. It's been a business model that has existed in other industries for many, many years. It's a model, though, that has not existed in the IT industry, but it's certainly not a foreign model in the least. The notion of paying someone an agent commission is very, very common in other industries. It just has not been common in the IT industry, and our belief is it will become more common over time.
Super. Thanks so much for clarifying that. Another one that's come in is beyond commission, what types of other partner incentives do you recommend?
Well, it's a great question. There are constantly offers out there that competitors provide, not only at the end user level but also at the partner level. And as in any industry, and even in selling hardware, there's always opportunities to earn additional money. So where you may pay a residual commission for some period of time, you may say, and for every service of X, I'll give you another $100. Or if you grow your base of revenue on this particular product from X to Y, we'll give you a percentage of that uplift over time. So, there is always going to be a standard compensation model, and then at any given quarter, which typically is when these incentives last for 90 days or so, you want to drive someone on a behavior to sell a certain product, then that's what you do. Additionally, you can have contests where, those who sell the most get to go to the trip to the Super Bowl or what have you. And those are standard as well in the industry. But paying the baseline comp is standard, and then paying for behavior is the other element. And at any given time, depending on market conditions, competitors adjust to providing specific incentives like the ones I've described. So you always got to keep your eyes on that pulse because it happens constantly. And I would say there's literally hundreds of those sorts of incentives every quarter out in our industry, and you have to be mindful of them, no different than you would be in the sales of routers or software or servers, what have you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Another one that's come in is, how are you helping traditional partners make the shift to reoccurring model? You touched on tools and making it easy to sell. Are there other items you are offering to help the financial shift of their business?
So we do a lot of training on webinars and online to help partners understand how to do this. And then, of course, our channel managers are responsible for onboarding new partners in their given territories and teaching them how to do this. It's interesting that customers are asking partners to be involved in these services and be involved in this process. And so they're having to learn it out anyway, and they're coming to seek assistance. In addition, some of our master agents also are involved very actively in that process of helping train their downstream sub-agents, who many are VARs, solution providers, on how to do this. So it's really, a combination effort. Our belief is that as more customers ask the VAR to be involved in the sale of our kinds of services, they will seek out their own education, but we're certainly providing a lot of the tools necessary for them to do it, particularly on training and through our distribution network, getting our partners at Sell For Us to help teach others underneath them as well. And we'll continue to do those types of things as time goes on.
Excellent. How do you develop the compensation model for existing VARs selling on premises of software now being asked to sell the cloud solution services?
So I think it's going to be a lot of the same. I think, it depends on how much you can afford. I mentioned a commission that's in the mid-teens for the sale of a network service, and of course we derive a pretty good margin for selling those services since we build them. And when you're talking about a cloud offering that's a SaaS offering, you're typically having to pay some software company some amount of money. So therefore, you may have to pay differently, perhaps less of a residual to make it affordable, or you may only be able to pay an upfront commission with no residual due to the economics, because it all depends on how much margin you can make in the sale of that cloud SaaS offering. And you may not be able to make as much as you could with a network communications circuit. So the margins are different, and every company will have to evaluate that of doing the math of the commission they can afford based on the margin they're deriving on the sale of that service. So I think that's a critical piece. And indeed, some companies are already just saying, look, we won't pay a residual commission, but we'll just pay 3 times the MRC up front and be done with it. So everyone has to investigate their model based on the margins that they need to derive and the appropriate structure financially that makes sense for them. But I think, whether it's residual or whether it's upfront or some combination of the two, that will be more the model of the future than, rebilling. And indeed, there will be a lot of rebilling going on, so we're not naive to that. The question is, will that be a long-term strategy or a shorter-term strategy? And I think time will tell.
Thank you so much. We have a comment from an attendee saying an excellent webinar, thank you. And then saying, have you found that there are different legal compliance considerations for partner compensation in different regions or countries? If so, any things to watch out for that you could share?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do know that in Europe, there are different laws associated with this notion than there are in the United States, and so, and in individual countries as well. There's notions of what is referred to as co-employment and concerns regarding that need to be dealt with. This model is very common in the U.S. It's been out, and in fact, this idea of creating a residual commission and an agency model has been out as long as there's been long-distance services. I think, between AT&T and MCI, they created this kind of model, but again, this model existed in other industries long ago, even before it had existed in telecom. I do believe, though, that in any given country, there are different issues in France and Germany, et cetera, than there may be in the United States, and therefore, you'd have to investigate what would work in those countries based on the applicable laws as opposed to here. But in the United States, a very common model. There are definitely considerations every company has to consider and protect themselves in these contracts, which is probably a whole nother webinar on what legal considerations you need to put in a contract to sign a partner to such a thing. And that obviously is a lot more information than we can share today, but that's definitely things that need to be looked into depending on where you're located and what issues you have with your particular service.
We might just have to reach out to you on that one, Craig. Thank you. Another one that's come through is looking at the referral model. Do you ever encounter trust issues? How do you maintain visibility for the referee so that they see what happens to the lead? Or is a referral defined as a close lead, i.e. customer has already decided to buy before the vendor gets involved?
Yeah, I see the referral model as really one where the partner is not interested in becoming real involved in that sale because they're essentially getting an upfront payment, and typically the referral model is one of a 1x payment, 1 times the MRC. In a model where the partner wants to be more actively involved, you must have rules of engagement. I didn't talk about that today in the presentation, but the notion has to be that there's parity between the direct team and the channel team. And in our case, when it comes to SMB services that are more transactional in nature, we operate on what we refer to as an Inc-Wins model, meaning if a direct person is working with the customer and a channel partner is, whoever gets the customer to sign the Inc. or the contract is the beneficiary of the sale. And then in more complex services such as Ethernet, where the bill is in the thousands of dollars. We operate more on a kind of a deal reg model, similar to that which others on the call are, I'm sure, familiar with, where you have a certain amount of time protected to close it, whether you're direct or whether you're a partner. And if you close it in that time, you're unencumbered and you won't face a direct team. But this is an important point, that in a recurring revenue model, unlike a hardware model, for example, Cisco, I know, they pay as many as 14 direct employees on the sale of every partner sale. And that's because the partners are acting on behalf of the customer as their support organization. They're responsible for all the AR. They're responsible for all the headcount that goes into it. Cisco is responsible for none of that. So they don't have to endure those costs. Therefore, they can pay direct and indirect on the sales. In a world like this, where the service provider is enduring all those costs, the idea that you can pay the direct team, the channel partner, and everyone in between, there's just not enough money for it. So the idea of teaming with a direct model doesn't work very well in this model, unless you're getting your channel partner to endure more of the costs. But if it's just strictly an agent model like this, I think people will find that the idea of paying their direct team on every sale and their partner doesn't work. So it's more Darwinian, and either the partner wins or the direct team wins. And that's one of the challenges of the model. Again, a webinar for another day, but that's at a high level what the issues are there.
Excellent, Craig. Thank you. Another one that's come in is, do you support your VARs with any marketing of your service? Are webinars like this one of an effective tool to offer and support the VARs or not?
Absolutely. They all like using these as a way in which to understand how to do this, and we do provide marketing dollars based on a discretionary basis. It's not a co-op model per se, but we offer the opportunity for partners to give us a plan in which they want to spend money to do certain activities to drive demand, and at our discretion we'll approve those opportunities and allow our partners to participate with their downstream customers. We do a lot of that activity, so in our view, we see the channel as an extension to our direct sales force. We've got a direct team out there that's hitting a certain portion of the market, and at the same time we want to enable our channel to hit a portion of the market. There's certainly conflict in between, and we deal with that, but ironically it's actually fairly limited conflict, and probably less than 10% of the time do we see it, which just demonstrates how much opportunity is out there. Because the other 90% of the time we don't see conflict. So we want to enable the channel to do more things from a marketing standpoint and basically carry our flag into battle, so to speak, and represent us. And that model is really no different than any high-tech company that operates a channel.
Great. Another one that's come in is, what commission percent is normally paid to an agent sales rep?
So then it's a question of the owner wishing to take the portion that they get, or the VAR owner or manager operator, and take a portion and give it to the rep. I mean, that's all dependent on the comp model. But I do suggest that whoever that is, they really need to have a team of people that get this recurring model and are really focused on it, laser focused. But generally speaking, there's probably a 50-50 kind of model, where let's just say they were getting 4x up front, or they were getting 16% commission. They'd probably give away some portion below that. There are advantages to paying the VAR rep a residual, because it keeps them staying with the VAR for many years, because they don't keep getting the residual if they're not employed there. There are also advantages to paying them up front to keep them very focused on getting new deals. And depending on which provider is paying how much, you'd have to have a model for each provider and say, these are the 20 providers we represent, and with these ones we pay you the rep this way, with these ones we pay you the rep this way. And I think depending on what services they're selling, the comp can vary. And so that's a short answer to that question, but I think that the VAR rep must be involved and be able to participate in the model. Whether that's 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, I mean, that's up to individual VAR owners as to how much they can impart to their sales teams.
Fantastic. Another question that has come through is, are there a lot of VARs selling cable services today?
There are thousands. So yes, there's quite a few. And it's because their customers are asking them to be responsible as the one neck to choke, meaning that, I went to this cloud model and I've got these things in private or public clouds, but I also need connectivity and I don't want to go to someone else to figure that out. You're my trusted advisor for all my IT needs, and I consider connectivity an IT need. So please, Mr. VAR or Mrs. VAR, will you please fix that for me? And that's why they're getting involved in it, and also because it's part of the solution. So you can't really decouple connectivity because it's intrinsically linked to the total solution, which VARs have been providing for many years. So yes, we're seeing a large amount of partners in that community jumping into the fold in this space. And we expect more and more to do so, not only for our kinds of services, but also for other cloud services that we don't even offer.
Brilliant. Another question that's come through is, how will software as a service, IaaS, PaaS fit into the model compared to just selling bandwidth or voice services?
Yeah, so that's related to that earlier question, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. All of those are obviously new cloud offerings beyond just connectivity. And every one of them is going to have their own compensation issues. And, you've got companies like Amazon, Rackspace, doing public cloud stuff. You got private cloud things coming from HP, IBM, and others. They're going to have to determine how they're going to compensate on it. I would tell you today, most of them are doing it in a resell, rebill fashion, meaning the VAR buys from them and at a certain price and then marks it up to the customer. That's the known model. But again, I submit to you that that model may endure for some period of time. It may even endure in perpetuity for very large integrators. But for the 150,000 average VARs out there that are $1 million to $5 million a year companies, the idea that they can buy and rebill like that over time, I don't think that's going to fly. I think they're going to become more agent-like in their approach to it than rebill, resell. And depending on those platforms, we'll see which is the more popular model over time.
Fantastic, Craig. Thank you so much. We've actually run out of questions now, believe it or not. I know you've had quite a few come through. So we just wanted to say that a very big thank you to everyone for joining us for this time on the Channel Focus webinar. And a fantastic, fantastic webinar, Craig. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. It was really helpful. We really had a fantastic time listening to this webinar, so big thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the time.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. The webinar has now finished, so you may now disconnect. Thank you.